Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Driveline Baseball Saberseminar presentation with the Driveline R&D podcast crew. I'm Josh Hejka here with Jack Lambert and Marek Ramilo. Today we're talking about projecting pitch design, and we're really excited about what we have to share, so let's jump right in. Some of the key ideas we want to touch on today. Our research is going to help pitchers optimize their current arsenal, as you can see here. Fill in gaps in the grid of pitchability, which in some sense means maybe adding an additional pitch. And knowing how to win each game state according to the RE288 run expectancy grid that we can see alluded to here. In terms of some of the motivation and objectives, people in the industry are saying that 2025 is the year of the pitch mix. And by people in the industry, I mean one guy in particular, Lance Brzdowski. As you see here, he's mentioned it quite a few times, but there is a lot of truth in what he's talking about here. As you can see on the left, new pitch trends over the course of the last few years. Sweepers are now up to around 10% of all breaking balls. The sweeper didn't even exist really as a pitch until like 2020. Obviously, the pitch tag didn't exist, but the horizontal sweeping slider didn't even exist really until the last few years, and we now see that usages are increasing very, very much year over year. Same thing with splitters. Over the last few years, the percentage of splitters as off-speed pitches has risen as well, up to about 25% of all off-speed pitches thrown. On the right here, we see what is called the Herfindahl-Hirschman index, which is usually used as a measure of market monopoly power. So the higher the Herfindahl-Hirschman index in an industry, the more that a single company is monopolizing the industry. In our use case, a really high HHI would mean that a single pitch or pitch type is monopolizing. The number is going significantly down, which reflects the fact that pitch mixes have increased over the last few years in particular. So what role do different pitches play in an arsenal? And we're kind of talking about why pitchers add a pitch or why pitchers use a pitch. The grid of pitchability, which is something that our trainers produce for us, the general idea with the grid of pitchability is that for both left-handed and right-handed pitchers, left-handed and right-handed hitters, pitchers need different weapons to get different types of results, called strikes, whiffs, weak contact. And different pitches are utilized in different ways to get those different results based on the batter handedness and based on the game state. Stuff is a reason that pitchers utilize or add a pitch. It's stuff has become a very prominent term in the industry. We see stuff models all over the place. Stuff in our sense just means a pitch that is more effective at getting dominant results, whether that's a swing and miss, really weak contact, etc. One use case of this, or one example of this, would be my rising slider in the 2022 offseason. For those who don't know, I was a relief pitcher in the Mets and the Phillies organization the last 6 or 7 years. In the 2022 offseason, I was worried about my slider shape. It wasn't very effective. It wasn't getting many swings and misses. Coming to Driveline, I was able to utilize the pitch design resources here to add a rising slider a la Tyler Rogers. This pitch, if you go to if you look at my next season results, got a lot more swings and misses and got really weak contact. It was best utilized for me as a stuff pitch. Command is another reason that pitchers may add a pitch. Stuff represents the ceiling of a pitch. But if you're not able to locate it properly, you're not going to be able to maximize, you're not going to be able to reach the ceiling that you could attain with that pitch from a stuff perspective. So a pitch that maybe sacrifices a little bit from the command perspective, but that you can pinpoint a little bit better to the best locations in the zone, that might be a pitch that is worth adding or utilizing in certain game situations. As you can see here with Andrew Hoffman's kick change that he added in this last offseason, coming into this offseason, he did not have great stuff or great command of his pitch, and the changeup just wasn't really a weapon for him. But through his work here at Driveline, using the intended zones tracker and utilizing the new grip, he received a much higher location grade and a much higher stuff grade from our models this season. Both of these things lead to the fact that this changeup is both a stuff and a command improvement, and that's why he utilizes it in certain situations to take advantage of that. Finally, weak contact is another reason that pitchers may add a pitch. John Schreiber's cutter that he added in the 2024 offseason is a perfect example of this. Sometimes there's game situations where, weak contact is going to get you the most effective, has the opportunity to give you the most effective result. For example, if you're behind in the count 2-0 and you need a pitch to get you out of an at-bat. Weak contact is epitomized by John Schreiber's cutter that he added in the 2024 offseason. As you can see, he had really, really high rankings in xWOBA against, xSlug against, and hard hit rate when throwing that pitch. Finally, arsenal effects, we'd be remiss to mention, something that we talked about significantly last year in the presentation. Arsenal effects, if you add a pitch and throw a pitch, it has the opportunity to make some of your other pitches better. And that would allow you to get more value out of those pitches than you otherwise would. So it's now important to talk about what matters for determining what pitches a pitcher can throw. First thing and most obvious to a lot of people is your arm slot. If we look here with 4 different pitchers, we have Verlander, Brash, Ryan Thompson, and Tyler Rogers. They have very, very drastically different arm slots. If you want to hold movement constant, so let's say we want to throw a very sweepy slider with not a lot of vertical break, all 4 of these pitchers, we need drastically different ball manipulations in their hand in order to achieve that movement, whether that's the way they release it, the way they hold the grip. All those ball manipulations would be very drastically different for all these different pitchers. On the other hand, if we hold the ball manipulation itself constant, very different movement profiles are achieved. As you can see, Tyler Rogers throws what for Tyler Rogers is a rising slider, is for Ryan Thompson a sweeper, is for Justin Verlander a curveball. When you add in seam shift effects, the range expands even more. For example, Ryan Thompson can seam shift his sweeper down to a slurve if he wanted to. Same thing with Verlander could seam shift his curveball up to a slurve. There's very different combinations of seam shift and Magnus movement that can create very drastically different movement profiles depending on your arm slot. Next, we want to talk about fastball pronation versus supination bias. If you hold your arm out straight in front of you, if you rotate your palm up, that's supination. If you rotate your palm down, that's pronation. Pronation and supination have an effect on how a pitcher is able to release a pitch and what pitches he's able to possibly throw. This has been talked about in the media in the past. For example, this Baseball Prospectus article talking about what's called the pronator's triangle. For Luis Castillo, he throws a very spin-efficient fastball, which means he is a pronation bias. Other guys have a supination bias. For example, Kenley Jansen, who throws significant amount of cutters. Brian Bannister has also talked about this in the Tread Athletics video here. But the types of pitches a guy can throw and should throw will depend on their pronation versus supination bias. The seam-shifted wake versus spin efficiency relationship also relates to the supination versus pronation bias. As you can see, a lower active spin leads to more spin axis deviation. What this means in layman's terms is that pitchers who have more of a supination bias are able to achieve more seam-shifted wake movement than a pitcher who has a pronation bias. Finally, what other pitches a pitcher can throw also affects what pitches he can and should throw. An example of this is the breaking ball velo shape trade-off. So if we look at Yu Darvish here, the harder he throws his breaking ball, the less total movement that there's going to be. This relationship exists for every pitcher. As you become more supinated in release, which is how you get those larger breaking ball shapes, you're necessarily going to have more of a velo difference from your fastball. As we can see here, highlighting both the curveball and the slider, if all we knew about Yu Darvish is that he threw those 2 pitches, we could guess reasonably well that his knuckle curve and his sweeper would exist where they do on the movement plot. Next, I'm going to pass it along to Jack to talk about what does the pitcher control.
So ultimately, all these things Josh has talked about, really the pitcher is in control of their manipulations of the ball. And what this means are the velocity, how hard it's thrown, the rate at which it spins, the 3D spin axis, so talking about the spin axis on the clock, as well as the spin efficiency, and then the seam orientation. And ultimately, these 4 things result in the velocity, Magnus movement, and non-Magnus movement. So when we're making this model that's going to predict what pitch types a guy can throw, we're going to be looking at these 4 manipulations of the ball. In this example here, we're looking at the spin angle of all the different pitches they have. But we know, as Josh talked about previously, that the same manipulation of the ball can result in drastically different spin angles according to the arm angle. So what we're going to do then is normalize all of these spin angles for arm angles. So you can see here, the angle of each pitch type is shifted down to the unit circle of 0 according to the arm angle. So then from this, we're going to see how every individual pitch deviates from every other pitch. So looking at these deviations in spin angle terms, in reality, we're doing this on all 4 different measures that we talked about that the pitcher controls. So yeah, it's this same process for velocity and spin rate. What we do then is we can map this to Magnus movement. This is currently an analytical model. There's room to improve in the future by finding a physics-based approach. But as you can see, the relationship is pretty tight between the predicted Magnus horizontal and induced vertical break and the actual. From this, we can also apply a bound of uncertainty for the non-Magnus movement. So given a Magnus profile and velocity, we know that a shift is going to occur from that star to the little dots there with the corresponding distribution of possibilities. So let's look at an example to tie this down to earth. We have Hunter Green's current arsenal here with a fastball, splitter, and slider. So when we apply this, when we're predicting what the fastballs look like, we're taking the four seam, we're predicting all other pitches tagged non-four seam based on the existing relationships we see in MLB. We're doing the same thing for the slider, predicting all the fastball shapes, and the splitter, predicting all the fastball shapes. And when we do this for the slider, we are predicting what all of the different breaking ball profiles look like. As we can see, that slider is smack in the middle of that distribution of what we think is possible for Hunter Green. Then lastly, the splitter, same thing. We're taking the fastball and looking at what all other off-speed pitches look like. We're taking the slider, looking at what all other off-speed pitches look like, as well as the splitter if a guy were to throw a separate changeup as well. And ultimately, that results in this sort of blob of blobs of all possible pitch shapes. And kind of the beauty of this methodology is that if a certain pitch type is really good at predicting what another pitch group will look like, that density will be much more concentrated. Whereas if I'm using a splitter to predict a breaking ball, that distribution may be very sparse. So that slider compared to all other breaking balls will be much more dense and be weighed more heavily than the splitter in this case.
So given this composite, this blob of blobs, as Jack alluded to, we have a sense of what each pitcher can throw. If we were to take this a few steps further and recommend how one's best arsenal can be deployed, with recommendations on in-game usage, shape modifications, and new pitch recommendations, we can optimize toward what a pitcher should throw. This table restates some of the training problems that Jack and Josh alluded to when it comes to arsenal construction, specifically as an off-season project. When pitchers understand that they have an arsenal that can't do a certain thing, or they have too many pitches in their mix that don't get used, there are certain protocols for addressing that problem. There's also the interesting notion that sometimes a pitcher doesn't have the ability to achieve a wide array of shapes, and we've offered a quantitative methodology for describing what he can achieve in the slides that preceded this. We hope to, from here, provide a quantitative framework that describes this whole set of problems in a more rigorous fashion. This approach calls back to some other research that has been done in the past. Matan K wrote this idea that an arsenal should be described as a quiver filled with arrows that achieve certain things. This is very similar to the grid of pitchability that we alluded to earlier, where each pitch should be able to satisfy certain outcomes. But this is a little too imprecise because it allows us to add pitches to an arsenal that we know might be called upon in certain states. But ultimately, we also see a problem where pitchers add shapes for the purposes of adding shapes. What we really want to do is add shapes that help pitchers win counts, win at bats, and ultimately win the game. So the way we do that quantitatively is we traverse the RE288 matrix, which describes for each count and base state the forward run expectancy for facing a pitcher or a batter in a given situation. And our objective is to make pitches and make decisions that improve, or in this case, from the pitcher side, prevent runs going forward. So given an initial state, here, for example, no outs, a 1-2 count, and bases empty, the RE288 matrix shows an expectancy of 0.38 runs to get through the rest of the inning. If we were to look at a target state, i.e. the best possible state for a pitcher to navigate to, that target state would be the 1 out, no runners on, 0-0 count situation that has a run expectancy of 0.24. And this would be a transition from 0.38 to 0.24 of negative 0.14 runs if a pitcher were able to achieve that transition. But if we were to understand that there's a distribution of states that a pitcher might move to from the initial state and consider all the adverse states here, we might find that there are other transitions that could occur that are bad for the pitcher. For instance, If we were to navigate to the no outs, OO count, bases empty situation, but because a run has scored via homer, let's say, the run expectancy for the rest of the inning becomes 0.45 plus the one run that has scored, which is a transition value, a delta run expectancy, let's say, of plus 1.07 runs. This results in, or it implies, a histogram of possible delta run expectancies from the initial state to all proximate transition states described here. What we want to do is live on this side of the distribution, which are positive expectancy transitions for the pitcher. And if we understand the shapes that help us achieve those transitions, then we can delve into usage recommendations accordingly. Now, typically, the dominant strategy for a pitcher is to throw the pitch that gets him a strike in a given situation. And this maps very well to targeting CSW, where the command pitch or the stuff pitch is the thing that a pitcher should throw. But here we describe a couple situations, important situations, where the CSW pitch is not necessarily the dominant strategy for a pitcher. We see, for instance, if a runner is on third with no outs, certainly getting a called strike or a whiff is advantageous. But in a case where a runner's on first and one out, it follows that getting a double play, getting weak contact on the ground is what a pitcher should target. So to solve for this, to solve for the usage recommendation output that we want, in consideration of all the possible transition values, and in consideration of states where a ground ball or weak contact or something other than a called strike or a whiff is our target objective, we ran this spec of something that looks like a chess engine solver, simply because of the common framework that is navigating from one state to another by making optimal decisions. We start with the RE288 values themselves, which imply transition values, and we layer upon that our play probability model outputs, which allow us to take the RE288 transition probabilities, take shapes that generate certain outcomes, and morph all that together into this expected delta RE288 by pitch shape. From that, we can imply a usage scheme for a given situation and roll all that up into a more macro usage scheme recommendation. Here is an outlay of all the various inputs and outputs for this solver, some of which we've gone over here. And effectively what we're doing is picking points from this masked blob of blobs to say, here is a ranked list of each shape's ability to get you from state 0 to state 1 or further to state 2 in the most optimal way, given our expectations of outcomes from the shapes that we know that you can achieve. This could be implemented in a very practical way, say in game, by providing recommendations for a pitcher on what to throw to achieve outcomes that he wants. So what does that recommendation output potentially look like? It might look like what's captured in this data frame here. So in the previous slide, that was Chase Burns in college, looking at a pitch com which could display something like this. Now we have a target usage scheme sized to the X delta RE288. And what this is saying is that of all the shapes that we know a pitcher can achieve, there might be shapes that he currently doesn't throw. There might be shapes that he currently does throw. And if we were to throw them according to their ability to generate the optimal transition in RE288, we provide a menu of pitch selection such that we're not pigeonholing the pitcher to one specific scripted pitch, but we offer the ability to choose among a set of dominant strategies that can allow us to achieve the outcome that we want. If we were to layer on something like a simple decay model, you can see how those usage recommendations might converge toward a uniform or roulette type distribution where because of the known decay effects through the times of the order, we would be able to modify the recommendations to account for this and further randomize as we go through time with the lineup. And finally, without limiting ourselves to the shapes that the pitcher currently achieves, we again reference the blob of blobs to understand all of the things that a pitcher is capable of and target very specific shapes that best move us forward to the best possible state given our current situation. As alluded to earlier, there are recommendations in here of the shapes that a pitcher can throw but maybe doesn't currently throw. Again, as we work through an off season, we might allow a pitcher to refine his arsenal to contain the sorts of shapes that would help him win the RE288 situations that he currently isn't equipped to win. To expand this analysis, not to just look one state forward, where you're not just trying to win the current situation by getting to the next best proximate square. Instead, you look 2 pitches forward, understanding that you might be able to set yourself up for an even better outcome with a setup pitch. If we were to apply some of the things that we found last year with our mix and match model, you might be able to, again, set up your final pitch with a pitch that contrasts very much with high mix, or a pitch that looks very much like the pitch you're ultimately going to throw that matches very well. These are the sorts of applications of our arsenal model that we think roll up well in the RE288 optimization, because in order to win 2 states forward, the best thing to do might be to throw something that sets you up 1 state forward.
So tying all this methodology together, we'll go back to the Hunter Green example of his current arsenal. We can see the grade here from 20 to 80 on how effective his fastball is against right-handed hitters in all possible 288 game states. We can see here this is above average in almost all game states. Behind in the count could be a little below average. We can see the slider here, less effective than the fastball in general, but there are some situations where it is favorable to throw over the four seam. And then the splitter, this is a pitch he uses mostly against lefties, so makes sense, grading out a little bit below average in all these different categories, or all these different game states against right-handed hitters. So what if you threw the best possible pitch in each game state? We can see here zoomed in, and then macro level, this is a very fastball dominant strategy. When there's 2 outs, it's almost entirely fastball. There are a few sliders and splitters mixed in, but if you were to throw the best possible off of our calculations, it would be the four seam in most states. But what if multiple pitches are effective? We can see here that we can actually make this a weighted usage scheme as a function that Marek explained previously. We see here that, yeah, it's pretty fastball dominant, but there are a lot of situations, look at 1-2 counts, 0-2 counts, where the slider will get a lot of usage. And overall, this transforms the whole map in the following way. We can see that there is still reason for him to throw the other suboptimal pitches by our model. So how do we determine if he should add the new pitch? We can see here that there's a proposed sinker that's around 96 miles an hour, about 16 inches of arm side run and 6 inches of vert. On paper, sounds like a pretty good opportunity. Does it help, though? We can see here that it grades out pretty well in when he is behind in counts, specifically with 1 outs and 2 outs. This could be a favorable pitch to generate some weak contact, as a lot of sinkers are against same-handed hitters. We can actually see that it is more valuable in the four seam in a lot of count states here, and actually does win in the dominant usage strategy. And when we add in the proposed usage, this sinker would be used a lot by our model's projections as something that would be extremely valuable when he's behind in counts with a runner on base. This could definitely be a tool that could help Hunter Green, and we project he'd be able to throw something similar to it. So when delivering this to an athlete, they obviously do not want to see 288 different pie charts telling them what to throw when. We can see what an example deliverable might look like here. So we have the current arsenal. We would have the suggested arsenal for any different pitch changes. We would also apply our methodology to project any possible new shapes we think they could make. So the next steps in this is I would say a good process, not a completely ironed out one. It's based on stuff. So the stuff-based outcomes need to account for some command constraint or ability to zone and pitch, or even better than that, pinpoint to pitch. This methodology, though, does allow for simulated innings, games, and seasons. We can see here an initial run. This is still a work in progress, but the bones are there to be able to run this. For pitch utility research, show why a guy like Mariano Rivera is able to get away with near 100% cutter usage, and why other guys diversify to almost even usage across all their different pitch types. For game calling assistance, having these macro level usage recommendations could be very valuable for a catcher in knowing what to call in what scenario. Then ultimately efficiency. If knowing when to throw that pitch that could generate a weak ground ball or get out of an at-bat early, similar to what Skeens was quoted at, talking about when adding the sinker earlier in the year. And ultimately, that's all we got here. Thank you for watching, and check us out on Twitter and YouTube for the podcast.